can't just blame misinformation on influencers. My name is Zion and I have a Master's in Science Communication. I want to discuss this phenomenon of blaming influencers for misinformation. Now, of course, there are people who deliberately spread misinformation online, and certainly I spend a lot of my time firefighting in those circumstances, but misinformation far predates the advent of social media, and in fact, people have often been skeptical of scientists and the scientific community. Where does the MMR causes autism myth come from? Andrew Wakefield came up with this idea. He submitted a paper to a prestigious scientific journal, and The Lancet published that paper, which said it was evidence that the MMR vaccine causes autism. Actually, it was then found out, thanks to a journalist, that the author of that paper had broken ethical guidelines, that he used a very small sample size. This should have already been evident to the scientific community. Many other things that basically made it really bad data that should never have been published. Now, once this was found out, the paper was retracted, but the damage was essentially done, and that myth still exists today. Now, in an instance like this, I think that the scientific community does have to take responsibility and think, okay, we made a mistake. Why did that paper even pass peer review? Why was it published at all? And how do we deal with the repercussions of this and the fallout? The fact that so many people now believe this myth. My experience in the field of science communication is that a lot of scientists actually don't believe in doing the communication. In fact, some are dead against it, and they don't feel that that knowledge should be for everyone. This is not a new phenomenon. Carl Sagan wrote Cosmos. He was offered a deal to make a TV show out of it, presenting popularized science to the world, and numerous scientists wrote to him asking him not to do this because they felt that popularizing science wasn't a good idea and that it would be teaching people information that they couldn't handle. Even the famous theoretical physicist Richard Feynman wrote in one of his books that popularized science dumbs down people, and that if they're not capable of doing the science themselves, that knowledge isn't for them and it shouldn't be shared with them. This gatekeeping of science still exists in the community today, and that same community will then blame influencers for misinformation while refusing to do the communication that is so essential. Now, I understand a lot of scientists have a lot to do already, don't necessarily want to do the communication side, but that's where the scientific institutions and universities and governments need to step in and fund and support communicators to do that outreach. So I'm not saying that influencers aren't a problem, but I do think there's a problem of there not being enough influence from the scientific community. We've also made this mistake of putting so much overemphasis on STEM and neglecting humanities subjects, but people need those humanities subjects to develop the critical thinking skills needed to understand the STEM subjects so that they don't just protest every new technology or discovery that comes along.